me and my girlfriend are gonna go bowling, which has a very special place in our heart because that was our first date that we ever did together. However, she thinks we're gonna go there and just review bowling as our weekly adventure. But my goal is to see how much that I can win at bowling. The plan is to do some research and study as much as I can before we go bowling, learning tips and tricks, all the skills and anything that I can to how to improve my bowling as quickly as possible. Then when we finally do and decide to hit those lanes, I'm gonna try to apply all the knowledge that I've learned and see how much my bowling has increased. And lastly, the future version of me is going to review and tell you everything that went bad and everything that went good, which I hope is a lot of it. I honestly have absolutely no idea how this is gonna go, but there's only one way to find out, so let's go. Welcome to my channel where I take on different challenges and adventures and encourage you to take on adventures yourself. Now, if that interests you, be bold, subscribe to my channel, but let's get into studying the techniques that I'm gonna need for the big game of bowling. I did my research on YouTube and there were 3 main channels in which the videos I found were the most helpful. That was Inside Bowling, BowlerX.com, and my favorite, which was Brad and Kyle. Look at those 2 buddies. And learn a lot of things about bowling, but the main techniques that I'm gonna be focusing on is the approach towards the lane. So there's a 4 or 5 step technique of how you walk to it, where to aim, what I'm gonna be looking at in order to make sure that the bowling ball goes where I wanna go, but mostly that perfect technique, the curve of the bowling ball, in which I really want to master, because there's a reason why the experts do this. If you hit the pins straight as hard as you can, they do explode, but you notice the pins get pushed backwards, resulting in some stragglers, which is sometimes why you saw it felt like you're about to get a perfect strike, but then you get 1 or 2 of those pins still standing there. With a little bit of a curve and a hook, the ball will hit the pins sideways, having them explode in a sideways direction, hitting more of all the pins, getting that perfect strike. I watched a lot of bowling videos, more bowling videos than I thought I would ever watch in a lifetime, but it's game time, time to go pick her up, and let's see if those techniques are actually gonna work. We got to the bowling arena, had our fancy shoes, which you gotta love, and we started with our first game. Now, I'm not trying to do any special technique just yet. I want her to fall into a false sense of security because I'm trying to get a grasp on some of the other smaller techniques that I learned. Every lane is different based on the oil pattern that's actually on it. Where the oil is more sleek and where the bowling ball is gonna get more traction will change. There were not really a lot of differences between each ball that the experts would talk about. They were mostly basic plastic bowling balls. As we got closer and closer to the end, I started to test out the stepping techniques and the approach, but with a straight throw. I used the dots and the middle triangle at the end and visualized a straight line in order to make sure that when I actually aimed, it went where I wanted to go. That visualizing and everything helped, which showed that my research came with a lot of promise and I was able to aim it the way that I wanted to. She got warmed up as well. She did really good and we had lots of fun in our warm-up game. And it was very close as I started to get points at the end, but the victory came to her. For game 2, it was time to bring out the big guns. Curving the ball. According to all my research, the best way to do this was on your last step. The opposite leg of your throwing arm is going to slide at the end so that your hip doesn't block the ball. You want to aim from the second arrow, which goes from right to left if you're right-handed. As you swing the ball down, before release, you want to do this handshake motion in which you twist your hand at the bottom, creating a small spin in the hook of the ball. 3/4 down, it will start to do a small curve, hitting the middle pin, smacking all them down, and creating an amazing strike. And the first hit didn't go so well, but I thought I just needed to understand it a little bit, so I tried again, and again, and again, and again. And it just didn't work. I just couldn't get it. What happened is I ended up practicing the sunken cost fallacy more than actually practicing to hook the ball like the experts, which resulted in a big loss, like a huge loss. Like it was my first time playing bowling. So going into our last game, game 3 was more for fun. Since I've already lost the other 2, I stopped trying to curve the ball and decided to just shoot straight. And after a couple of shots, to my surprise, a lot of them were doing very well. Like, I mean, very well. Did a couple of more, and I was getting strikes, spares, 9-point rounds. I was doing surprisingly well, and you could tell that she was getting jealous. I was doing so good, in fact, started doing just joke shots, but somehow they were still effective because everything else of the technique still worked. At the end of the game, it was perhaps one of the best bowling games I've ever had, and had a huge lead and won the game by like a landslide. Something worked. And I had a theory on the lessons that I learned and how you, as a beginner, if you want to win, these are the things that you need to do. Ooh, hello. Out of those 3 games, the last game is where I did my best, like surprisingly well. I think the best bowling that I've ever done, which came out of 3 big lessons that I learned from this little trial and error. First is that curving the ball was way more difficult than I thought it was going to be. Look at all the tutorials, they're just so good at it and they made it look so easy. And that false sense of security made me feel like I would be able to learn it relatively quickly, but I just couldn't get it. Either that's because of the bowling ball, the lane, or it's my technique, which mostly is the technique. I just didn't have that clicking moment where it finally all fit. Number 2 is if you want to win more at these average games of bowling, doing a straight line is definitely going to help you the most short term, just not long term if you think you're going to play multiple times, because the balls are plastic and they're almost meant and designed to be able to hit more of a straight line, because that's how most people are actually going to do it. But that means everyone else you're playing with is probably also trying to do the same thing. What you want to do is do all the techniques that are going to help you in order to get that straight line. And third is a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of practice goes a long way. Like, I learned a lot about bowling, which just seems like a very simple sport, kind of like darts, but there's a lot of nuances, that goes into the sport when you get to an expert level. But no matter what you are doing, just having a little bit of that understanding or diving into something that you probably would never do in the first place gives you this understanding that you never would have before. When you do decide to do it, you're not just some person trying to figure it out, throwing the bowling ball and hope to see what happens. You're actually learning something about it, applying it, and no, you're not gonna be an expert, you're not gonna win all the time, especially if you're just trying to do a straight line, but you might go from average to slightly above average. And I think if you're trying to win against the people you're going against normally, that's what you can hope for. So what do you think? Do you guys like bowling? Are you one of those people that are able to curve the bowling ball very well? Maybe you can see what I'm doing wrong in order to help me improve, to be able to curve that ball and to get better at bowling. And if you have any other tips and tricks to help people get better at their casual bowling games, leave them down in the comments below. You can always hit me up on social media. I'd love to see whatever tricks and skills that you guys have. And either way, I will see you at the next adventure.